Spirit of God, open our minds to your words spoken for us. And in hearing you, the veil will be lifted, and we will be free. Amen. So one of the things that I loved to do, and I especially loved it during college, was to study myths. I love mythology, still love mythology. I think there's great truth and power about the human condition and about God in myths and stories. And I think we all, in some way, in some fashion, have our favorite stories. Favorite movies, favorite myths, classic books of literature. And many of these classic stories, in some way, at some point, involve the search for something greater. A journey to find something greater than the main character, him or herself. And in that journey, on the way to find and encounter the greater, there's inevitably some test. There's some sort of temptation made to veer the main character off the road to what they are trying to find. The journey of overcoming the lower to find the higher. And the main character has to overcome that temptation in order to reach the ultimate end of their journey. We've all heard the story of the Odyssey. Homer coming back from Odysseus coming back from the Peloponnesian War to find his family after many years of being away. And is tempted all the way to be lost, tempted to veer off his path. The most famous of these is the Sirens. So he and his crew were sailing, and he had these beautiful voices singing that tempt sailors to crash into the rocks. The story of Dr. Faustus, in which Faustus is tempted and actually does sell his own soul to the devil to have 24 years of unlimited power. The Lord of the Rings, which is actually an entire Christian myth in itself, has the main character journeying to the mountain. And during this entire journey, is tempted over and over to keep this ring, this symbol of power, for himself. And he is tempted, and his companions are tempted to steal this. Even Star Wars. Yes, I'm a myth geek. I like Star Wars. Even Star Wars, the journey in the story is filled with temptations to power, being seduced by the dark side, and seeking to become one with the Force, which is actually God. And I think these stories resonate with us because there is an unconscious understanding that in order to find the things that are higher, peace, love, true love, God's will for our life, that there is a need to overcome the more base things. And that's what the reading today, the temptation of the desert, is about. Jesus himself had to overcome his attachment to safety and to survival. His human need for acceptance and success. The need for power and control in his life in order to move on and to find God, and as importantly, to do his mission, to complete his mission. He had to master these needs. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with any of these things. Safety, success, control. The problem is people spend their lives in an inordinate amount of energy and time trying to chase and seek these things. Seeking and serving the needs for survival and power and approval. And in all of this, they ignore God. God becomes secondary. Now, in this gospel reading, Jesus has just been baptized by John in the Jordan, and he's led out, forced out into the desert by the Spirit. And when the devil tempts him, he uses the same phrase, "If you are the Son of God." In his first temptation, he says, if you're the Son of God, use what God has given you wrongly to survive, to feed your appetites, to meet your most basic needs. Use your power for bread. It's not so bad, is it, Jesus? You're hungry. You're out here doing God's work. The truth is, it isn't. We all need to survive. Jesus was hungry. But the temptation was for Jesus to misuse what God had given him to satisfy his appetites, and not to trust that God would provide everything Jesus needed in God's time. Then he's tempted to overturn the order of things, good honoring evil, Jesus honoring and worshiping darkness. For what? For success, for approval. An easy road to an easy life. A disordered and warped relationship, one not based on good, but on what can I get out of it? What's in it for me? And finally, the temptation to power. And I think, my brothers and sisters, this is often the most difficult one for us to overcome. Throw yourself off the parapet of the temple, and everyone will see you, and they'll see the angels catching you. Then you'll have power in their eyes, notoriety, influence. Then they'll know you're the real deal. Then they'll listen to you, and you can do your job and your mission even more successfully. You see, that's how darkness works. It looks for our needs, our hungers, our scars, our brokenness, our regrets, our guilt, and our shame. And it finds a way to exploit them. And that's where temptation begins. Darkness finds what we need most, what we hunger for most, and twists it. Evil takes what we want and what we need and turns it upside down. Our need to feel safe, to feel valued and important, if it was betrayed, can be twisted by evil to push people away and keep them at arm's length. Our need to love others, to be accepted and valued, can become a misuse of our sexuality and a betrayal of the person who trusts us. It can lead to relationships that are disordered, abusive, and manipulative. Our need to have a sense of power and control in our life can become a quest for power over others, to build ourselves up by domination and bullying. Whatever it is that you hunger for, you can have if you look for it in the right place. Because only God, knowing God, turning your back on all the quick fixes, the easy outs, the shortcuts, the illusions, and the fast answers, can you find real peace. In my final year of seminary, I had the opportunity to spend a month on retreat in the Sonoran Desert in Arizona. And one morning, one of the other seminarians and myself decided we would take a hike. And one of the things about the desert is this. There's not a whole lot around you. There's maybe a few saguaro cactuses, some scrub brush, and besides that, a whole lot of nothing as far as you can see. Now you would think that because of this, it's hard to get lost because there's nothing blocking your view. You can see in every direction for miles. But precisely because there is nothing around you and everything looks exactly the same, it's very easy to get lost, to lose your way in the desert. So what we had to do as we were hiking is we had to be hyper-aware of what our focus was on. We had to keep the retreat house always at our 6 o'clock, always looking back and checking and making sure we were where we were supposed to be. And then eventually when the retreat house disappeared, the one hill on the landscape, we always had to make sure it was at our 3 o'clock. And then when we turned around eventually, we had to reverse everything. We had to pay attention very carefully to what we were focusing on, because it was easy to lose our way. See, the desert is a place you have to stay alert. You have to stay focused on what is guiding you. So it's little wonder that this is where Jesus encountered evil first in the gospel. But Jesus stayed focused on what his direction was, on what was most important. Jesus in this story never lost sight of his Father. He never lost sight of God despite all the temptations and how much he did want them, I'm sure. Every time he was tempted, he went right back to God. God in the Scriptures. And that's usually where we fall, because we lose sight of God. Dietrich Bonhoeffer once described temptation like this. At the moment of temptation, God is quite unreal to us. God suddenly loses all reality, and only the desire for what we want is real. Evil at this moment does not fill us with hatred toward God, but with forgetfulness of God. See, it's really easy to get lost, brothers and sisters. To lose sight of God as first in our life because power and affection and approval and survival seem so immediate and so important. How many people do you know personally or hear about or see on TV that do nothing more than try to increase their own power, to promote and increase their brand, who are building up what they own and possess? How many people do you know that will lie and lie and lie again to remain in power and make themselves look good, only to lie again when they get caught? People who subjugate and abuse others to fulfill their need for affection and gratification, who live in disordered, upside-down relationships filled with deception. We vie for power. We try to edge out and get the upper hand in our relationships, our marriages, when we have conflict. We seek power by excluding others, making it us and them. Power by being the chosen. We look for approval and affection in the wrong people. We try to measure up for the wrong reasons. We feed our appetites at computer screens and in shallow relationships. See, the temptation in the desert wasn't something that happened one time 2,000 years ago to one person. It happens to us now, every day, many times a day. Jesus showed us how to meet that temptation. God first in everything. His Father guided and directed, colored and shaped everything that Jesus did. God was his passion and his purpose. His Father was his first and his last. And that's what the first reading is talking about today. Moses is teaching the people as they look out onto Canaan, as they're about to enter the Promised Land. When you get there and you receive what God has promised you, don't forget God. Give the first thing you receive in your harvest to God as a way to remember where it comes from. And then when you give it, remember. Think back to how you got here. Don't forget that you were once slaves in Egypt and now God freed you. Don't be forgetful of God. Jesus focused all his life on his Father first. And he teaches us to do the same. I am the way and the truth and the life. And the thing is, we cannot meet God. We cannot reach God. We cannot live the life God wants for us until we overcome the need for power and acceptance and survival. This place that we come to every Sunday and worship. And our Monday through Saturday lives as Christians are about one thing: living and understanding and choosing exactly as Christ has taught us to. Lent is our time in the desert, a time to remember how easy it is to get lost in our temptation, to make those temptations seem okay, to make deals with them, to make it seem all right. These things that come to us every single day. But our hope is that Christ walked this journey before us. Christ understands everything that you struggle with. Christ is the example. And the message for this season of Lent, my sisters and brothers, as we are in the desert, keep your eyes on God. Amen. Amen. Could it be so?